One beautiful evening, Siwoo confessed his love to the class baddie, Daein. It became awkward, so Siwoo took the L. Feeling bad, Daein revealed that she saw Siwoo as a bestie. After losing 1,000 aura points, Siwoo walked out and met his friend, Yushin, who immediately figured Siwoo got rejected based on the tears streaming down his face. Siwoo explained what had happened, and Yushin couldn't believe Daein's lame excuse. Just then, a ball came dashing towards Siwoo, and he decided to farm aura points. Even though Siwoo had a sick routine that could make Gorlock the Destroyer look like a hot model, he still looked like he lived in KFC. Later that day, Siwoo got home, looking at his parents' photo, and new jeans weren't the cause of his plus size. Siwoo had never seen his dad since he went to get milk, but he had heard stories of him being a famous wrestler. Fed up with his diet, Siwoo wanted to eat junk food but lost to the rapper. Later, he went for a jog, thinking about his aura debt from earlier, and tried to run away from his L. A few moments later, Siwoo was exhausted, wanting to find where he had run to. Suddenly, an ominous figure complimented him and jumped in front of him. Siwoo was freaked out, hoping this wasn't some weird priest with all the cake Siwoo had. The old man introduced himself as Mangti, the boogeyman of monsters in their region. Siwoo was utterly lost, but before he could process anything, the old man whipped out a sack and captured him like it was Pokémon Go. A while later, Siwoo was released from his bondage and tried to make sense of what was happening. That was when Siwoo realized he wasn't in the human realm. Mangti explained they were in the spirit world, and that once every 666 years, an ancestral ceremony is held to select the next Yokai king, where young, outstanding monsters from each clan compete. It was time for the next ancestral ceremony, and Siwoo told Mangti to calm his old man's diapers, confused why he was dragged into this. Just then, Mangti revealed that Siwoo carried goblin blood in his veins. Siwoo was shocked, but then, a giant-mouthed monster descended from the sky and landed right in front of him. The old man told Siwoo he could eat the monster if he defeated it. Meanwhile, the monster was hyped to chow down on some premium human meat and dashed forward. The monster delivered a massive punch to Siwoo, which sent him flying. Mangti explained that Siwoo had to prove himself to be worthy of candidacy for Yokai King. However, the monster grabbed Siwoo and slammed him to the ground and tried to squish him like a bug. The old man had given up, but then Siwoo's goblin ability awakened and he lifted the monster's hand. Mangti was surprised with what he was seeing, and Siwoo suddenly got jacked. Instinctively, Siwoo had harnessed his goblin ability and was able to flip the monster. Standing his ground, Siwoo began farming aura points, having just gotten his first W. The next day, Siwoo told his Yushin about what happened the previous night, calling it a dream. Yushin was just glad Siwoo was having fun after all the L's Siwoo had stacked. However, Siwoo was low-key suffering from PTSD from that whole experience. Yushin also found it sad that Siwoo got clapped in his own dream. Also, Yushin pointed out how weird it was that Siwoo suddenly knew wrestling moves when he had never learned them, and Siwoo could only chalk that up as another mystery on his growing list. His friend was surprised that Siwoo got that immersed in a dream, and Siwoo figured maybe it was stress from all the Eltikes he had been collecting recently. Just then, Siwoo wondered if his obsession with losing weight had gone so far that he became jacked in his dreams. Suddenly, Siwoo found himself back in the spirit realm, and Mangti informed him he was actually asleep while standing. Siwoo couldn't believe Itachi didn't use a genjutsu on him. Looking around, he saw the same monster he had folded the last time, and panic set in again as he tried to make sense of the situation. Grandpa Mangti decided to casually ask Sialhwa, the baddie standing next to him, what she thought of Siwoo. However, Sialhwa couldn't believe he was such a sad loser. She was shocked that a loser like him had goblin blood, and Mangti filled her in on the fight she witnessed. Sialhwa wasn't impressed since Siwoo didn't use magic, only brute strength. Worse, Siwoo struggled against a monster her grandma would have clapped in her sleep. Just then, Siwoo interrupted the convo, wondering if he could go back to the human realm. Immediately, the old man dashed forward, revealing he had made his decision while Siwoo was asleep. Meanwhile, nearby monsters who had witnessed the fight couldn't believe Siwoo was a goblin descendant, which they hadn't seen in ages. Mangti, the boogeyman himself, declared that Siwoo wasn't human, but was a full-blown monster, and Mangti told the monsters to spread the news. Meanwhile, Siwoo was only focused on how to get home. Sialhwa gasped in disappointment, realizing Siwoo hadn't clocked the fact that he was now a monster. She explained that unless he learned to conceal his abilities, he couldn't safely return to the human realm. Siwoo protested that he had never hurt anyone, but then Mangti immediately unleashed murderous intent, making Siwoo instinctively step back. This was a clear giveaway of his monster instincts. Mangti explained that among monsters, goblins were the honored ones. Siwoo was a greenhorn goblin, but his strength had already surpassed normal humans, and without control, he could easily harm them. However, Siwoo wasn't about to wait 500 years to get access to the human realm. Just then, Mangti revealed that it wasn't his call, but that of the current Yakai king who restricted monsters' entry to the human realm long ago. Back in the day, monsters could roam Earth freely while humans either ran for their lives or worshipped them. However, after the last ancestral ceremony, new laws were enforced, keeping humans safe and monsters hidden. Now, with the Yakai king's reign ending in 6 months, those laws would be rewritten. Mangti explained that when that happens, all monsters could potentially flood the human realm, causing absolute chaos. Just then, Mangti gave Siwoo a choice to wait 6 months like he was the diddler, or train his powers and possibly prevent that disaster. At that moment, Siwoo asked how strong he could become. Impressed by his determined look, Mangti revealed that with his goblin blood, Siwoo could grow powerful enough to protect the ones he loved. Moreover, if Siwoo won the ancestral ceremony, he could even reenact the law restricting monster entry to the human realm. Suddenly, Sialhwa cut in, tired of their cap. Mangti finally introduced her properly, revealing she would also compete in the ancestral ceremony representing her clan. Sialhwa wasn't impressed with Siwoo, and doubted he would have the guts to actually participate after acting like he had massive nuts. Mangti added that Sialhwa was basically a nutcase, pestering him to enter the ancestral ceremony despite being young. Meanwhile, Siwoo was still freaking out over the fact that monsters would be able to enter the human realm in just 6 months. Just then, Sialhwa complained about having to prove herself in a test before being allowed to enter the human realm. Mangti agreed, but revealed that it was to test her patience and self-control. Sialhwa accepted, but hoped it wasn't an excuse to ghost her. The boogeyman admitted he had another task for her, which was to teach Siwoo the basics of being a monster by the end of the month. If Siwoo progressed, they would both qualify to enter the human realm. Hearing that, Sialhwa nearly passed out, knowing the task was basically impossible. Mangti told her she could either deal with it or wait 6 months like everyone else. Suddenly, Mangti was swallowed by his magical sack and flew away. Left alone, Sialhwa asked Siwoo if he knew about the monster force, but Siwoo was completely clueless. She wasn't surprised, but then the monster Siwoo had defeated appeared behind her, grinning now that Mangti was gone. Sialhwa was pissed, and this made the giant-mouthed monster tremble, but that didn't stop it from charging at her. Siwoo panicked, but Sialhwa was a high-class monster, one of the 9-tailed fox clan, basically royalty among monsters in the region. She effortlessly bound the monster, flexing her true strength. After a few moments, Siwoo's fright faded, replaced with pure awe at what he had just witnessed. Sialhwa casually explained that what he saw was magic, and using magic consumes energy and forces. She added that there were 2 types of magic, unique and acquired magic. His unique magic came from his goblin bloodline, basically, a built-in hack with no fancy training required. However, acquired magic was different and any monster could learn it, but only with effort and dedication. Sialhwa then casually roasted the giant-mouthed monster, stating that it was trash because it skipped school. The monster trembled in fear, but Sialhwa wasn't fazed. She declared that she would teach Siwoo, but warned him that if he didn't show results, she would straight-up unalive him. She even offered him the chance to back out since his life was literally on the line. With a determined look, Siwoo made his resolve clear that he was ready to train under her. Sialhwa smirked, already convinced Siwoo would flop, but was willing to humor him anyway. She then suggested they grab a meal, which left Siwoo confused. She reminded him that consuming forces was essential for using magic. Moreover, Siwoo's monster force levels were rock bottom. Normally, just being in the spirit realm naturally replenishes force, but Siwoo had only arrived last night, and his weight loss diet wasn't cutting it. Sialhwa figured he should be starving, but Siwoo didn't especially feel that way until suddenly, his body went numb like he was on some kind of crack. Sialhwa explained that he had drained most of his monster force, flipping that giant-mouthed monster earlier. The only solution was to eat the defeated monster and absorb its force. At that moment, Siwoo stepped forward, instincts kicking in as an overwhelming, demonic hunger flooded through him. This primal desire was fueled by Sialhwa, But what she didn't predict was for Siwoo's greedy little goblin senses to target her, since she looked a lot more tasty. Just then, Siwoo jumped her, but Sialwa instantly bound him with her magic, completely stunned by his audacity to try and eat her. Furious, she was ready to humble him when suddenly, Siwoo broke free from the magical bindings with sheer brute strength. Sialwa's eyes widened. She couldn't believe it. She had forgotten he was a goblin and they were basically walking cheat codes. Acknowledging his raw strength, Sialwa decided to stop playing nice. She activated a blood art technique, summoning the arm of the great demon king itself and firing off a Kamehameha-style energy blast straight at Siwoo. Siwoo survived the attack, and Sialwa didn't feel even a little bad after all. He attacked first. Still, deep down, Sialwa didn't expect much from Siwoo since he had only just awakened his powers. However, within the Goblin clan, only a rare few were chosen to become truly enlightened, unlocking the full potential of their unique magic. It was unheard of for someone to display that potential so soon, yet here was Siwoo doing just that. Without hesitation, Siwoo pulled off his horn, which transformed into a goblin's club, radiating with energy. Sialwa couldn't help but be impressed and a little frightened. Sialwa was no ordinary monster. She had achieved her 9 tails at an age when most monsters were still sucking on their mum's breast. It usually took over 1,000 years to unlock that, but Sialwa was built differently. That was why she knew that if she let her guard down, one slip-up and she was cooked. At the moment, Sialwa wasn't too worried because she knew Siwoo barely had any monster force left, and the W was basically in the bag, or so she thought. Suddenly, Siwoo began emanating an ominous aura that screamed plot armor activation. In a split second, Siwoo dashed forward, transforming his goblin's club mid-charge. Electricity crackled around him as he unleashed a lightning strike technique. Sialwa reacted instantly, summoning the Demon King's arm to block the attack. The massive hand snatched Siwoo's club, yanked him forward, and slammed him into the dirt like he owed the ground money. However, Sialwa wasn't naive and knew Siwoo was ridiculously durable, and one slam wasn't enough to take him out. She prepared to smash him again, but to her shock, Siwoo resisted the pull of the Demon King's arm. No one was supposed to be able to resist even a fragment of the Demon King's power, but Siwoo wasn't following the script. With brute strength, Siwoo yanked the goblin's club free and, without hesitation, reshaped it mid-fight, using it to smash the Demon King's arm, and the ground shook from the force of the blow. Sialwa's eyes widened. This power wasn't normal. Deciding to stop playing, she summoned a second Demon King arm and unleashed a barrage of punches, determined to overwhelm him. However, Siwoo deflected the attacks with his club. At that moment, Sialwa realized that even monsters with 100 to 200 years of training couldn't touch Siwoo. Now it made sense why goblins had such a terrifying reputation. However, there was one problem. Siwoo's monster force was nearly drained, and Sialwa could tell he wasn't going to stop until his body snapped apart like a broken action figure. Letting out a huge sigh, Sialwa decided to end this quickly. She used 5 of her tails, channeling her energy to summon the upper half of the Demon King itself. Siwoo, stubborn as ever, launched himself for another attack. Just then, the Demon King was done playing, and with a giant slash attack, Siwoo was sent flying across the battlefield, body ragged, aura nearly gone. Sialwa walked over, telling him he was knocking on death's door thanks to his own reckless pride. However, deep down, she was mentally preparing for the scolding Mangti was definitely going to give her later. She turned to leave, but then Siwoo cried out weakly for his mom. Sialwa paused, pity flickering across her face. With a sigh, she picked him up and in one swift motion kissed him, passing her fluid into him. Just then, Siwoo collapsed to the ground and Sialwa explained that magic from her fox bead wasn't free, expecting him to repay her for the investment. A while later, Siwoo woke up grog but very much alive, lying in Sialwa's room. She entered the room and glared at him, probably regretting her life choices, but Siwoo couldn't hold back his grin, like he had just won the lottery. Later that day, Siwoo apologized to Sialwa for attacking her earlier. He explained that he had been conscious but completely unable to control his body like his instincts had hit the override button. Siwoo apologized for his recklessness, but Sialwa wasn't in the mood for feelings. Instead, she told him to down the drink she brought for him. Siwoo eyed the drink suspiciously, wondering if it was some weird oriental medicine. After taking a sip, Siwoo immediately regretted it. He wanted to know what he just drank, but Sialwa brushed him off, saying there was no need to know and encouraging him to finish it all like a concerned mom forcing medicine down her offspring's throat. Changing the topic, Sialwa casually mentioned that the giant-mouthed monster from before had escaped, but technically, Siwu still owned it. Apparently that fight was considered smooth sailing, and now Siwu was basically its daddy. Moreover, Sialwa hoped he didn't spit out the medicine mid-conversation like a toddler. Siwu, still trying to process the situation, asked if there was another way to gain monster force without eating other monsters. Sialwa laughed at his nonsense. Although Siwu wasn't fully on board with the idea of eating monsters yet, the logic was simple. Monsters were a threat to humans, and if they needed to be eaten for strength, so be it. Still, Siwu was hoping for alternatives. Sialwa explained there was another method, an agreed duel. However, weak monsters were easy prey, and they would avoid Siwu completely now that word had spread about his goblin bloodline. Meaning, Siwu wasn't on the weak server but on the elite server with stronger opponents. Since the giant-mouthed monster escaped, Sialwa had a backup plan and revealed that she had a present waiting for Siwu outside. Stepping outside Sialwa's room, Siwu's eyes landed on a restrained monster, and the present title suddenly felt like a scam. Shaken, Siwu listened as Sialwa explained that some monsters lose themselves to instincts, just like Siwu almost did earlier and become little more than beasts. Such monsters lose all rights as proper monsters and are labeled shudderwocks. High up on a building, Sialwa watched Siwu, wondering what he was staring at until the shudderwock broke free. The beast lunged, but Siwu narrowly dodged the attack. Sialwa, amused like she was watching Netflix, fully expected him to freeze and get clapped, but to her surprise, he kept evading. This particular shudderwock had been notorious for his greed. He forcefully captured and ate other monsters to boost his monster force, surpassing his limit and going completely berserk. Now, all that raw strength was aimed at Siwu, who kept dodging, but Sialwa quickly realized he couldn't summon his goblin club consciously. Not that she expected much, his monster force control was still trash. The beast was physically superior, and it was obvious Siwu was lacking. However, Sialwa also knew that true instinct awakens when you're staring death in the face. Just then, Siwu took a stance that made Sialwa pause. With surprising precision, he landed a clean punch on the shudderwock. Back in the day, Siwu had tried boxing. His coach, impressed by his natural skill, even asked if he was aiming for KSI-level fame. However, Siwu only cared about one thing, losing weight. After some persuasion, Siwu trained under him. Unlike other martial artists, Siwu's obsession was purely with weight loss. Through sheer stubbornness, Siwu never gave up. Over the years, Siwu had tried a ridiculous 16 types of sports, 7 of them combat sports. The tragic part was that Siwu never lost weight. However, thanks to his goblin bloodline, all those skills had stayed with him, and now he was finally putting them to use. In the present, Siwu unleashed a flurry of strikes, drawing on all his combat experience. The shudderwock didn't stand a chance and was getting clapped. Sialwa couldn't make sense of what was going on. Within moments, the beast collapsed to the ground. Panting, Siwu stood over it, victorious, but immediately faced with a new problem. How the heck was he supposed to eat it? After defeating the shudderwock, Sialwa narrowed her eyes on Siwu, trying to figure him out. She wondered if he had used martial arts, which weren't exactly designed to match a monster's ridiculous body or strength. Still, the fact that he had just gotten his monster body and was already pulling this off, plot armor was by his side. Just then, Siwu interrupted her overthinking, flexing his non-existent W and asking what he was supposed to do next, fully confident he had won. Sialwa, barely holding in her laugh, told him she would be happy to chat when he actually won. The supposedly defeated shudderwock suddenly lunged and bit into Siwu's shoulder, tearing out a chunk of flesh like a midnight snack. Siwu stared at the missing piece of himself, fully spiraling into a panic attack. Before Siwu could recover, the beast delivered a brutal uppercut that sent Siwu flying across the battlefield like Team Rocket. Meanwhile, Sialwa just stood there, amazed he didn't dodge or block, even though he had plenty of time. Immediately, she understood that the real reason humans feared injuries wasn't the pain, but the thought of losing body parts. That alone could traumatize a poor dude like Siwu. Just then, Siwu's wound healed. In an instant, the shudderwock slashed at him again, but the injury closed almost instantly. With wide eyes and renewed confidence, Siwu evaded the next attack with ease. His resolve solidified like he had hit his shonen protagonist moment. With lightning crackling around his arm, Siwu punched the shudderwock clean across the battlefield. His arm throbbed, and it felt like he had punched a truck, but his confidence skyrocketed. However, Siwu wasn't cocky enough to forget that the shudderwock could regenerate too. He half expected a sneak attack until Sialwa approached, noting that Siwoo's last hit had done real damage and the beast wouldn't recover right away. She also wanted to know how it felt using magic while being in control of his body. Siwoo blinked, shocked that he had used magic. Sialwa told him to chill his wiener. Sialwa then revealed that his regeneration was magic. Also, his last attack was a combo of magic and physical strength. Sialwa asked if he felt anything unusual. Just then, Siwoo admitted there was this weird electric shock feeling. Sialwa then confirmed it to be magic. Siwoo wasn't used to it yet, but she expected that. It was exactly why she made him fight the Shutterwalk in the first place, to force him to awaken magic, and she complimented him. With a wave of her hand, Sialwa used telekinesis to drag the Shutterwalk's limp body forward. It was time for Siwoo to finish the job. Siwoo said he was ready, but Sialwa wasn't convinced since taking a life for the first time was never easy. She advised him to do it in one clean strike. Hesitation would give the beast a chance for one last, desperate attack. She also pointed to the upper belly area, where the magic core, also known as the magic bead, was located. Everything was hard on the first try, but Siwoo steeled his nerves. With a clean strike, he ended it. Sialwa then asked if he grabbed the magic bead, explaining that if he swallowed it, the beast's magic would become his. Without hesitation, Siwoo gulped it down like an energy shot. Siwoo frowned, expecting some dramatic power-up, but instead a bird landed on his shoulder. The bird spoke, and Siwoo freaked out, stumbling backward. Suddenly, the bird transformed into a human lady. Sialwa sighed, already knowing who it was. The girl introduced herself as Salmi, glad to meet the infamous Half-Goblin. She claimed to be Sialwa's friend, and Siwoo introduced himself while Sialwa, unamused, asked what Salmi wanted. Turns out, Salmi worked part-time for Mangti. Meanwhile, Siwoo was definitely catching feelings and was about to stack up more L. Salmi explained that she was there to handle the rewards for the 2 defeated monsters. Sialwa waved it off, stating that Siwoo could have all the rewards. Getting a little too close for comfort, Salmi examined Siwoo, impressed by his potential. She teased Sialwa, wondering if Siwoo might actually be a threat to her at the ancestral ceremony. Sialwa snorted, confident that Siwoo was a one-minute man, but Salmi wasn't so sure. She saw enough raw potential to keep things interesting. With a playful smile, Salmi offered Siwoo a choice for his reward: go home or take the first step towards becoming a stronger monster. The next day, Siwoo called Yushin, his homie from the human realm, already stressed because Siwoo had skipped classes. Yushin realized it was Siwoo and was concerned. Siwoo couldn't spill the details since it was prohibited in spirit realm, but he did need a favor. After hearing Siwoo's weird request, Yushin crashed out, wondering why Siwoo was stoned so early. Siwoo wanted Yushin to tell his mom that he had gone to Yushin's family martial arts center for a month to lose weight. Yushin reminded him that not just anyone could stroll into the center, but Siwoo was unbothered. Yushin, being a real one, told Siwoo that he would listen and not judge if there was a problem. Before Siwoo could overthink it, Salmi chimed in, reminding Siwoo that telling humans the truth would break spirit realm rules. Siwoo brushed it off and cut the call. Meanwhile, Yushin hoped it wasn't what he thought it was. Siwoo was shocked when he found out he could return to the human realm, even though Mangti said it wasn't allowed. However, Salmi claimed otherwise, and Siwoo almost believed her but also wondered if she was just another TikTok influencer lying for clout. After thinking it through, Siwoo decided not to return home yet. If he didn't master his monster abilities now, worse things could happen. After the Shutterwalk fight, it was clear he needed real power to face what was coming. Salmi was low-key impressed with Siwoo, who was giving MC vibes. Meanwhile, Sialwa, watching them from the sidelines, joked that Salmi was having way too much fun teasing Siwoo. Just then, Sialwa exposed Salmi, revealing that there was never a reward that allowed Siwoo to go home. Salmi was trolling him. Salmi tried to defend herself, stating that messing with people was basically human culture. The 2 girls slipped into casual small talk, while Siwoo was down bad for Salmi with every sentence. During their convo, Salmi expressed disappointment that Sialwa hadn't read the book she gave her, which was important before she could visit the human realm. Just then, Salmi decided to take Siwoo out for the day. Sialwa, already done with their nonsense, gave permission like she was giving Siwoo's hand in marriage. Without warning, Salmi transformed into a giant bird, flexing that she had the right to move between realms. Although there was a condition that if anything went wrong, Siwoo, the unqualified monster, would take the fall. Siwoo didn't even have time to panic before Salmi scooped him up and took off. Presently, Siwoo thanked Salmi for lending him her phone, and Salmi asked if he was really okay with just one call. Siwoo admitted his only family was his mom, and she had left on a business trip. Honestly, he was kinda relieved, because her nagging would have been unbearable. To repay Salmi, Siwoo offered to buy her dinner. At that moment, Salmi lit up, revealing that she had always wanted to try something homemade. A few moments later, Siwoo whipped up an exquisite meal, flexing an unexpected Gordon Ramsay dish, and Salmi was blown away. Apparently, she only ever had takeout or sad school lunches. Siwoo was surprised, but Salmi casually revealed she went to school in the human realm, and Siwoo recognized the school. She admitted she only started that year and had no friends. Siwoo almost didn't believe her because she gave off way too much confident baddie energy to be lonely. After dinner, Salmi handed Siwoo his real reward. A monster storage, the spirit realm's version of a smartphone, but cooler. It could display whatever you needed with a finger swipe, store and retrieve items regardless of weight, and generally make life easier. With a little practice, Siwoo would get the hang of it. Also, Siwoo got a pile of spirit realm coins and a goblin treasure. It was an item that could manifest various abilities by infusing monster force. Normally, Siwoo was only supposed to get the coins, but Mangti had gone full sugar daddy, tossing in extra rewards because he believed in Siwoo. Siwoo couldn't believe Mangti thought he had a chance to win. But really, Mangti just wanted someone from their region to win the Yakai King ancestral ceremony, just for bragging rights. Salmi explained that at the last ancestral ceremony, a monster from their region almost beat the current Yakai King, and they were from the Goblin clan. That monster was the strongest their region had seen. Meanwhile, Siwoo still struggled to believe he was even part of that world, wishing this was all just a fever dream. Salmi disagreed, as she thought Siwoo had adapted fast, and his resolve also left an impression on her. She encouraged him to become the Yakai King, to protect the human realm and keep the current law that blocked monsters from invading. Suddenly, Siwoo noticed something odd, an emergency alert on Salmi's monster storage. Curious, he asked about it. Salmi casually explained that in emergencies, the system notifies nearby monsters. However, since it was happening then, that meant a monster either broke the rules or hurt a human. She brushed it off at first because emergencies were rare, but then it hit her. Her eyes widened, and just like that, the chill vibe had ended. Later that night, Siwoo snapped his fingers and the monster storage appeared like he was flexing a party trick. He took out the goblin treasure, curious how it worked. Just then, Siwoo glanced at the clock and remembered his earlier conversation with Salmi. She had told him she would be back by 10 o'clock p.m. and to sit tight till she returned. Before she left, she casually told him to speak freely with her next time. However, it was way past the agreed time, and Siwoo's paranoia kicked in. He was worried something had happened to her. More importantly, he realized it was pure El-Riz that he didn't get her number. Lost in thought, Siwoo started spiraling, wondering if his goblin blood came from his missing dad, and if his dad even knew he had goblin blood. Suddenly, Siwoo's spider senses tingled, figuring out that he wasn't alone while being on guard. Meanwhile, in a dark alley, a human was pinned down by an evil spirit, seconds away from becoming Monster Chow. However, Salmi arrived just in time, blasting it with a spirit gun like a Yusuk on overtime. She muttered about catching the same evil spirit over and over, and worried she would run out of feathers. The evil spirit bolted, and Salmi rushed to help the injured humans. One of them, wide-eyed and traumatized, and Salmi told him that his friend was alive and an ambulance was on its way. However, he continued to glare at the huge evil spirit looming over them, directly above Salmi. She turned and almost caught a one-way ticket to the afterlife, but someone saved her. Her savior, Gou, popped up like the classic overpowered anime character. He told her if she got clapped by such a low-tier monster, their family name would be finished. Salmi shrugged, stating that her family wasn't that impressive anyway. She joked that she knew her daddy would come save her. Gou told her not to call him that, but she insisted. He ignored her nonsense and rewrote the memories of the human victim with hypnosis magic. A flex, considering it wasn't even his innate ability. Salmi was mildly impressed, wondering if he was officially representing his clan at the ancestral ceremony. However, Gou brushed it off, claiming he defeated 2 evil spirits and wondered how many she took out. Salmi then revealed that she had taken out 24. She explained that based on the leashes on the monsters, they were being controlled. Her rough estimate was that 7 humans were made unalive while 50 were injured. She hoped whoever saw this as an amusement was ready to get obliterated. Just then, Goyu revealed that it wasn't for amusement and Salmi wanted the full gist. Gou revealed the old secret that in ancient times, goblins ate humans to rapidly boost their strength. Apparently, it was like the ultimate monster protein shake, and Salmi couldn't believe it. Gou explained that, yeah, eating humans was a quick power-up, but no one talked about it now because it would send the human realm into chaos. To most monsters, the human realm wasn't worth the effort of the qualification test, and only weirdos like them would go through such. However, as they drew near to the ancestral ceremony, some monsters tried to level up by any means necessary while even risking their lives to break the rules. Gou expected Salmi to know this, considering she worked for Mangti. Lately, tons of monsters had destroyed themselves trying to get stronger too quickly. Goyu added that if he was behind the attacks, he wouldn't have left such a mess. He would capture humans quietly, one by one, and chow on them later. Salmi then agreed it was such a cowardly move to send evil spirits to do the culprit's bidding. However, Goyu felt the current culprit was skilled enough to be able to control about 100 evil spirits. Just then, Salmi's gut told her something was seriously wrong. She dashed off, telling Gou to handle cleanup duty. Back at Siwoo's place, he stood on his balcony, sure he felt a presence lurking. His goblin senses were going off. Suddenly, a monster crept up behind him like he had found a Black Friday deal. The monster lunged forward for a strike, but Siwoo evaded just in time and fired off a magic attack. Siwoo had learnt from such attacks from earlier, and due to his goblin characteristics, he couldn't fall for similar tactics. A while later, Siwoo took a deep breath and recalled the cold chill he felt just before he was attacked from behind. Thanks to that weird moment, Siwoo narrowly avoided running into his dad. Instinctively, he had tossed the attacker away and hoped no one else got caught in the mess. However, Siwoo couldn't find the monster's body afterward. Suddenly, the monster reappeared, grabbing him from the neck and smugly claiming that he had put all the humans in the area to sleep. It was necessary, according to the monster, to clean up more efficiently as it choked Siwoo out. Snektok slithered in a zesty way, and wondered if Siwoo was the rumored goblin. Upon inspecting his monster force and magic level, Snektok was clearly disappointed with his mid-ability. The monster yanked Siwoo off the balcony and slammed him to the ground like a WWE finisher. Snektok descended, revealing his big brain cover story. The humans would just think it was a gas pipe explosion. The real culprit behind the emergency stood before Siwoo, and he knew he was absolutely cooked if he had to 1v1 this dude. Snektok even told Siwoo to just give up and get eaten since it would hurt less. Out of nowhere, the monster pulled out a photo of Siwoo and his mom, promising not to eat her. Before Snektok could finish his sentence, Siwoo blitzed forward and landed a massive punch right in his smug face. Unfortunately, it was all part of Snektok's 4D chess move. Siwoo had touched him directly, activating the monster's poison ability. The power only worked if his opponent made physical contact, a fatal trap for Siwoo, who walked straight into it. While Siwoo was paralyzed, the monster complained about the unfairness of the weak always being prey. He taunted that if Siwoo had used the goblin's treasure, things might have gone differently. Just then, Snektok transformed into a giant snake and was about to devour Siwoo like a DoorDash meal. However, Siwoo wasn't ready to be on Sneketok's side menu. Despite the poison, he summoned what strength he had left and launched a Kamehameha-style blast, although Sneketok was barely able to dodge it. Immediately, Sneketok retaliated, smacking Siwoo into a new manga panel with a single hit. He was impressed that Siwoo could even move, let alone attack. Suddenly, a blade struck Sneketok out of nowhere. He turned, confused, as a masked figure began chanting an incantation. Lightning surged through Sneketok's body. The mysterious individual stepped forward, exuding I am him energy, and was ready to cook. Sneketok was shocked that a shaman had a weapon, when the only thing they could do was raise a helpless ghost. However, Sneketok realized that the masked man wasn't an ordinary shaman, and wondered how he caught up to him. With reinforcements possibly on the way, Sneketok knew that dragging the fight could mean he was the one getting cooked. With a blood sacrifice, he summoned a powerful evil spirit, which was his trump card for the ancestral ceremony. He let it loose on the masked shaman while planning to eat Siwoo for dessert. The evil spirit launched a fireball, but the shaman didn't flinch. He dashed forward, sliced the fireball in half, then cleaved the spirit clean down the middle like it was on clearance. Sneketok stood frozen, unable to believe his ultimate move got insta-deleted. Just then, the shaman calmly stabbed him in the head, ending the fight with no hesitation, and Sneketok fell in agony. The shaman turned to Siwu, asking why he was even there. However, Siwu could recognize the voice of the masked man. The masked man pulled off his mask, revealing himself to be Yushin, equally surprised to see Siwu. After a few moments of silence, Yushin wondered how Siwu had managed to survive Snake Talk's attack. Siwu, still short of breath, struggled to respond. It was then that Yushin noticed that Siwu had been poisoned by Snake Talk's ability. Yushin had emergency medicine, but it was not enough to heal him. He considered going to get help, but suddenly, Siwu began to heal on his own. Yushin was shocked, but in that moment of distraction, he realized Snake Talk had dipped. Later that night, Siwu explained everything that had happened. Yushin listened carefully and couldn't believe he hadn't noticed Siwu was a half-goblin all this time. At that point, Yushin began making Ohio NPC noises like he had just overdosed on crack. However, Siwu was also surprised that Yushin was a shaman. Just then, Yushin explained that his family had trained for generations to eliminate supernatural beings. However, he was only in the game for another 6 months. Siwu was then shocked that Yushin knew about the ancestral ceremony. Curious, Siwu asked if monsters attacking humans in the human realm was a common thing. Yushin explained that it was rare. For centuries, monsters avoided attacking humans. Although lately, things had changed. Yushin revealed that humans had become the ultimate XP farming tool for monsters. In the past few months, the number of missing persons in densely populated cities had spiked. While there was no official proof that monsters were behind it, there was plenty of bloodstain found near the homes of the missing. Although this was the first time a monster revealed itself openly, suddenly, Yushin sensed someone approaching. Moments later, Salmi appeared, clearly worried about Siwu and full of guilt for falling for Snake Talk's 4D chess masterclass. Immediately, Yushin told her to shut her trap, threatening to eliminate her on the spot if she got any closer. Siwu wanted him to chill and calm his nuts, but Yushin was already in full I am him mode. Yushin claimed Salmi had gone against the law, giving Salmi a verbal warning to step back. There wasn't any need for verbal warning to strike, but Yushin wanted to flex in front of his crush. Yushin argued that monsters didn't belong in the human realm, even if they looked human. He saw them as potential threats, even capable of eating their own kind. However, despite Siwu's goblin blood, Yushin still saw him as human and didn't need permission to be in the human realm. Meanwhile, Salmi could see where Yushin was coming from. Still, she thought to herself that Siwu was a member of the spirit realm and she had every intention of dipping with him. However, judging by Yushin's aura, she could tell she would get cooked 1v1. She declared that she was Siwu's guardian and planned to take him with her. Yushin didn't like that and prepared to strike until Siwu booted him aside and yoinked his blade. Siwu examined the blade, curious about the engraving. However, Yushin grew suspicious and wondered if Siwu was being controlled. Siwu explained that he had never hurt humans, but earlier that day, he had devoured a monster and this left Yushin heartbroken. Siwu added that he would keep devouring monsters, not humans. Yushin tried to talk him down, promising to protect both him and his mom, but then, Siwu revealed that he was going to become the Yakai King. Yushin didn't understand the nonsense Siwu was spewing and tried to knock some sense into him. However, Siwu had made up his mind and told Yushin not to worry because it suited him. Eventually, Yushin told Siwu to do whatever he wanted, but if he crossed the line even once, he would personally erase him, and Siwu was cool with it. Before Yushin walked off, he gave one last warning that if anything happened to Siwu, he would come back and erase Salmi too. After Yushin left, Salmi started freaking out, nearly wetting herself from the sheer pressure of Yushin's aura. Just then, Goyu appeared, confirming that Yushin's was an elite-tier shaman among shamans, but Salmi was stunned that Goyu had stalked her. Goyu asked Siwu if he was the rumored goblin and stepped forward. At that moment, Siwu could only see a divine beast worshipped by humans and monsters alike when he looked at Goyu. Goyu extended his hand for a shake and told Siwu that he had to defeat him to become the Yakai King. At that moment, Siwu paused, sensing something off about Goyu's vibe. Still, he went on to offer a handshake. Before their fingers could touch, Salmi shouted for Siwu to stop. She was clearly pissed at Goyu, especially after everything Siwu had just been through. Homeboy was already having the worst Tuesday ever. However, Goyu didn't care and wanted to mess with Siwu after hearing him brag about becoming the Yakai King. With zero hesitation, he grabbed Siwu's hand and activated a blood art technique, instantly teleporting them away. A while later, they reappeared under the moonlight. Siwu struggled to stay composed, but Goyu was impressed he was still on his feet. Siwoo asked what Goyu's plan was, but Goyu dodged the question and casually asked if Siwoo liked computer games. Siwoo told him he doesn't play games so much. Goyu followed up, asking what genre he was into, and Siwoo replied with action RPG. Goyu was glad to hear that, but before Siwoo could process anything, he sensed something behind him and dodged just in time. Just then, a barrage of icicles followed, and Siwoo avoided them all like he was avoiding tacks. Goyu smirked and complimented Siwoo's footwork and split-second decision-making. In that moment, what truly shined brighter was Siwoo's adaptability, and every fight he had endured had leveled him up. Siwoo suddenly went airborne and fired off his Kamehameha-style blast. Even as he did, he didn't let up and followed up with a barrage of strikes to take Goyu out while being on guard. Siwoo got the hang of magic, which felt like an electric surge coursing through his whole body. He estimated that he had about 60% left in the tank. From earlier attacks, he was starting to understand magic usage like a stamina bar, and if it hit 0, game over. Meanwhile, Goyu protected himself using a reinforced icicle barrier and realized that he had underestimated Siwoo. Just then, Siwoo wanted to know if Goyu planned to devour him since he didn't feel any malice from him. Goyu clarified that he wasn't trying to devour him, but didn't like his delulu about becoming the Yakai King. Eventually, Goyu wondered if Siwoo really knew what it meant to be the Yakai King. To Siwoo, the Yakai King was the one who ruled over monsters. However, Goyu urged him to dig deeper. Goyu explained that monsters weren't like humans and were driven by instinct. You couldn't just slap a crown on your head and expect loyalty. The Yakai King wasn't a ruler in the typical sense, but a living safety device, something all monsters agreed to obey for the sake of survival. Goyu then told Siwoo to imagine a human leader making a law banning everyone from eating meat. Siwoo was sure that most humans would go against such a law, which would result in chaos. Yet somehow, monsters had followed the Yakai King's rule for 6 years. Goyu believed that the patience of monsters had run out, and if the next king enforced the same law, most wouldn't follow it anymore. Siwoo finally grasped it, and even if the Yakai King was the strongest, if no one listened, the title meant nothing. Goyu nodded, glad Siwoo understood. The problem Goyu had with Siwoo was that his earlier statement was reckless and arrogant. Goyu figured Salmi's presence was gassing him up. Siwoo asked if Goyu wanted him to take back his words, and Goyu was all for that. Originally, Goyu had seen Siwoo as trash, but now he saw potential. Enough that he even offered a partnership and wanted Siwoo to help him become the Yakai King. In return, he promised to never harm the humans close to Siwoo. Just then, Siwoo asked how strong Goyu really was, but he admitted he wasn't the strongest outside his own region, but he was good enough to matter. Siwoo then stretched out his hand and agreed to the offer. Goyu grabbed his hand, glad they were on the same page. Just as their bro moment felt great, Siwoo activated his magic and used the little he had to flip Goyu with a magic slam. After Siwoo's surprise attack, he stood frozen and his body was numb. He used most of his monster force in his final attack and couldn't continue the fight. However, Goyu, who looked like it was the start of his villain arc, and couldn't believe Siwoo had actually gone that far. Fortunately, he had used an innate defensive technique just in time to shield himself. Goyu admitted that if the gap in their monster force had been even a bit smaller, Siwoo might have actually devoured him. He smirked and asked Siwoo if he had any last words. Siwoo calmly told him that he was already prepared to be devoured. Just then, Siwoo stood up, claiming he could still fight with a bright spark in his eyes. Goyu tilted his head, amused, seeing as Siwoo could barely stand. Still, Goyu stretched his hand out and gave Siwoo a solid pat on the shoulder, impressed with his resolve. Meanwhile, Siwoo was confused. Goyu told him he was rooting for him to become the next Yakai King, and Siwoo wondered why Goyu was switching like it was a dating sim. Just then, Goyu revealed that since he was a kid, he hated the Night of Monsters. It was always noisy and chaotic. However, in the human realm, it was chill. Even though some humans acted like clowns sometimes, their way of life was peaceful. Also, Goyu was a fan of games and manhwa, things that didn't exist in the spirit realm. He believed that if things like games and manhwa didn't exist, the world would be tragic. Siwoo noticed something strange, that Goyu was referring to himself like there were two of him. Siwoo argued that Goyu should become the Yakai King instead, but Goyu refused. He had zero interest in the throne, but admitted their region had the best shot at claiming it. Although Siwoo had a problem, which was the fact that he was competing against high-class monsters who were strong from birth. Siwoo wondered if there was family pressure within the high-class monster. Eventually, Goyu revealed that once a family had an offspring with talent, they would force them to become the Yakai king. In a situation where the offspring doesn't agree, they would off the offspring. At that moment, Siwoo felt like the worst thing to happen to a person is if they become enemies to their family. This made Siwoo the perfect candidate for the Yakai king because Siwoo had talent, but no family chains dragging him down and still wanted to be the Yakai king. Siwoo didn't understand why Goyu was gooning over him. Right then, Salmi arrived and delivered a WWE dropkick to Goyu, slamming him face first into the dirt. Then she kicked him again across the battlefield like she was auditioning for the next Dragon Ball movie. She went full Saiyan mode, prepping her innate technique to obliterate him. Siwoo tried to stop her, but it was too late as she unleashed a flurry of feather darts. Siwoo panicked, but Salmi calmly told him the attack wouldn't land because Goyu had already dipped. Siwoo wondered who Goyu was, and Salmi revealed that the Goyu he fought wasn't the original Goyu but was a split personality. Goyu was from the Black Tortoise clan, a being born from a snake and a turtle merging into one. Their origin traced back to an ordinary turtle who awakened divine power by mastering yin and yang monster force. Later, at Siwoo's place, Salmi explained further that the descendants of the Black Tortoise were born with powerful innate abilities, but to fully awaken, they undergo harsh training. The result was the snake, Goyu's split personality. However, Siwoo thought his personality was okay. While the snake didn't have evil intentions, it was impulsive and handled combat strategy. It was also submissive to the main turtle personality. Salmi didn't like that it could take over whenever it wanted, and that was one reason some people opposed Goyu as a representative. After dropping the lore bomb, Salmi turned to Siwoo and asked if he had packed his things. She told him not to worry if they were late for anything. However, Siwoo was more concerned about the broken balcony situation. Right then, Mangti popped in like he had been stalking them the whole time. Mangti revealed that there were people who would handle it and told Salmi she could leave first. Salmi tried to defend Siwoo, but Mangti wanted to talk to Siwoo and they were surprised. Suddenly, Sialhwa was in the room, vibing like she belonged there. Siwoo asked if she had permission to be in his house, but Sialhwa casually said she was dragged in by Mangti. Mangti got serious and revealed that 50 evil spirits had disappeared in the human realm and attacked civilians in the streets. After fighting them off, Mangti thought someone had lured Salmi out, just to target Siwoo. Salmi asked what the real goal was. Mangti explained that at least 200 humans were already missing, possibly up to 500. Salmi was stunned but was confident that if the culprit was from their region, they could track them. However, Mangti agreed, but then revealed that monsters from other regions had likely crossed over, making them hard to trace. Sialhwa saw how bad it could get if things spiraled out for 6 months straight. That was when Mangti dropped the big twist that their qualification was different, and all they needed to do was capture the culprit. The next morning, Yushin was deep in thought, wondering why he had sent Siwoo off. A part of him felt responsible if Siwoo didn't make it back. Just then, Siwoo appeared out of nowhere, casually wondering why Yushin hadn't picked up when he tried to reach out. Yushin looked like he had seen a lone shark while Siwoo teased him. Later, at a restaurant, Yushin was being way too loud after Siwoo told him why he was in the human realm, and Siwoo told him to lower his voice. Siwoo explained that he was fine with the conditions he had been given and would be staying in the human realm. However, Yushin was certain Siwoo didn't know what class of monster he really was. In his defense, Siwoo actually found out he was a monster just the day before. Just then, Yushin let out Shinryan Kaigosu, a string of words that sounded more like an incantation than a monster classification. Yushin explained each symbol represented a monster's status. The lowest class was Su, where most monsters belonged. Although dangerous, their level wasn't much different from wild beasts. With weapons, humans could handle them easily, even without magic. If guns were involved, it would be a school shooter's dream. However, monsters above Su were a whole different story. The Go-class monsters had the strength of at least 100 humans physically, but even if 1,000 humans ganged up, they would still end up 6 feet under. Siwoo couldn't help but wonder how terrifying the higher classes must be, but Yushin couldn't give a clear answer. However, he revealed that Kai-class monsters were 10 times stronger than Go. Moreover, if the law restricting monsters from entering the human realm was ever broken, the world would descend into chaos overnight. Yushin mentioned that even a single Go-class monster could wipe out their entire town. Thankfully, Siwoo probably wouldn't encounter Shin or Ryung class monsters because they rarely broke the rules. Yushin then warned Siwoo not to meddle in the investigation of the missing humans. He advised him to just come hide at his place. Yushin was confident the shamans or other monsters would deal with the situation. Siwoo then asked what class he thought Snake Talk was, and Yushin revealed that it wasn't even mature yet, placing it in the mid-tier Go class. Yushin added that the evil spirit Snake Talk controlled had energy far stronger than himself. If Snake Talk had even half the control over that power, Yushin and Siwoo would have been goners. Yushin concluded that Siwoo was probably a low-tier Go class monster at best. He warned him not to mess with Snake Talk because Siwoo would surely get clapped. Yushin's words were harsh but necessary for Siwoo's safety. However, Siwoo wasn't buying it and was confident he could defeat Snake Talk next time. He admitted that without Yushin's intervention last time, he would have been toast, but now he had a better grasp of monster force and was stronger than before. Yushin didn't understand where Siwoo's overconfidence came from and stood up. Siwoo assumed he was heading to school, but Yushin revealed that he wanted Siwoo to come to his senses and to follow him. A while later, they arrived at the sports center, but the public didn't know about its other purpose. Siwoo was shocked that such a hidden place existed in the basement. He joked that Yushin's family probably owned everything. Yushin clarified that while the government owned the place, the shamans were from his family. Siwoo couldn't believe the government was aware of monsters. Just then, Yushin explained that the government always kept powerful shamans nearby, and it was probably the shamans who created the concept of government in the first place. Back then, with no monster threats, the royal family had training halls for shamans, traditions that continued with Yushin's family. Monsters, shamans, ancestral ceremonies, the government knew about it all, but they didn't take it seriously. Yushin then told Siwoo that if he was ready, he could come at him. Siwoo had to overpower him to prove he was strong enough to do as he pleased with the monsters. Siwoo looked around for a sword, but Yushin didn't need one, confident he could clap Siwoo with his bare hand. Defeating Yushin would prove Siwoo had surpassed Go class. Yushin told him to come get these hands. Siwoo hesitated, nervous, but then he dashed forward, ready to strike. In a flash, Yushin smacked Siwoo's hand aside and delivered a barrage of punches, knocking him to the ground. Yushin wasn't too worried about Siwoo being hurt since he had seen his insane recovery rate. Yushin hadn't even used full strength, and Siwoo realized Yushin was probably the MC of a manhwa. However, Yushin wondered if he was in a losing battle since Siwoo's body felt like hitting a brick wall. Siwoo realized Yushin wouldn't be hurt even if he stopped holding back, and Yushin realized Siwoo was more dangerous than he had thought. In a split second, Siwoo stormed towards Yushin again. Yushin's friend was shocked at Siwoo's speed, but his attack patterns were still the same. Yushin's knee had an appointment with Siwoo's face, but Siwoo still managed to lift him. However, Yushin used a shaman technique to create distance. Just then, Yushin was stunned to see Siwoo wielding the Goblin Club. It was the first time Siwoo had consciously drawn it. At that moment, Siwoo's condition was poor as he had used most of his spiritual energy in his last battle. Normally, he would have needed at least a full day of rest to recharge, and recovery was even slower in the human realm. However, his current state felt strangely similar to the moment he first wielded the Goblin Club. Back then, his control over his body had been a mess, but his senses were razor-sharp, allowing him to recall that moment vividly. Yushin had read about Goblin Clubs in some ancient texts, but he wasn't sure how exaggerated those stories were. Based on what he had seen so far, the weapon seemed mid. Just then, Siwoo lunged forward to strike him. Even Siwoo didn't view the club as remarkable, but the moment his attack landed, Yushin was forced to block. Yushin was genuinely impressed, knowing that if Siwoo were in a fully enhanced state, he wouldn't have been able to block that hit at all. Aware of how drained Siwoo was, Yushin had planned to drag the fight out until Siwoo collapsed from exhaustion. Just then, Siwoo slammed his Goblin Club into the ceiling, confusing Yushin. Siwoo admitted that he wasn't sure he could win up close, so he decided to hang on the ceiling to replicate the same power from his last battle. Transforming the Goblin Club, he hurled it at Yushin, who barely managed to defend himself. Siwoo didn't give him a moment to breathe and launched his weapon at him again, though Yushin narrowly evaded. It was then Yushin realized the Goblin Club was a real threat. He then wondered if Siwoo planned to keep losing aura points. Siwoo didn't care how it looked and was cool with fighting dirty. Because a W was a W, Yushin was left speechless, but couldn't deny Siwoo had a point. They were friends, sure, but if it meant proving his strength, Yushin wasn't above knocking Siwoo flat. Siwu launched his weapon again, forcing Yushin to crank up his speed. Siwu's attacks were becoming harder to dodge, and even though Yushin was adapting to his martial arts and speed, the gap was closing. However, Yushin didn't predict Siwu's misdirection, and Siwu landed a clean hit. Siwu immediately panicked, thinking he might have hurt him, but Yushin calmly caught the Goblin Club midair, chanted an incantation, and counterattacked. With one strike, Yushin cut off part of Siwu's weapon, but Siwu still tried to retaliate midair. Yushin dodged and unleashed another incantation, though he couldn't utilize any major techniques since his spiritual energy reserves were running low. Just then, Siwu landed on the ground, only for Yushin to rush in, ready to land a clean blow. Desperate, Siwu deflected the attack with his weapon, but Yushin swiftly slashed away what remained of the Goblin Club. Now, Siwu had no way to block. The W was practically in the bag for Yushin, or so it seemed. Just as he launched his final technique, it fell short, failing to reach Siwu. In that moment of confusion, Siwu punched him square in the face. Siwu was baffled and wondered why Yushin held back when he could easily recover. Yushin then explained that he had exhausted his spiritual energy, and his technique didn't work because it didn't register Siwu as a monster. The irony of it all hit Yushin hard, and to Siwu's surprise, Yushin teared up. Later that day, on the street, Siwu was quiet, and Yushin didn't like how anxious he seemed around him. However, Siwu was just worried his nose might still hurt, scared he had caused him emotional damage. Yushin revealed that it would heal within a day and pointed out that Siwu had held back his monster force before hitting him. Just then, Yushin admitted defeat and told Siwu he could do as he pleased since he had won the bet. Yushin then handed Siwu some gourds, explaining they could be activated by holding them and chanting a mantra, or by smashing them open in case of emergencies. Siwu hesitated, unsure if he should accept them, knowing Yushin had poured a significant amount of energy into them. Yushin was surprised he could tell and wondered where he had learned that. Siwu explained that the energy inside the gourds felt exactly like what he sensed fighting Yushin. The gourd was a special tool used by Yushin's family, where energy could be stored during peaceful moments to avoid situations where magic was hard to use. Whoever possessed it could consume the energy when needed. Yushin was shocked Siwu could sense all that because the gourd was sealed to hide one's energy. Curious, he asked to see Siwu's palm. He tried to read Siwu's fate, but what he saw was basically plot armor. Yushin was certain he would have tried to recruit Siwu if he wasn't a monster, because his talent was exceptional. However, Yushin remembered that Siwu was a half-goblin, so technically, there was still hope. Knowing his family, they wouldn't allow it because Siwu was basically turning into Ichigo with the Collect All the Powers starter pack. Yushin wished he had discovered Siwu sooner and let go of his hand. Siwu was surprised Yushin could read palms, but Yushin changed the subject, asking when he would attend school. Siwu explained that he would need a new uniform and some shoes first. Yushin smirked, already imagining everyone's reaction at school. Siwu was clearly enjoying his flustered expression. Checking his phone, Yushin realized time had flown by. Siwu offered to grab some food outside. Yushin was surprised they couldn't eat at Siwu's place, considering he cooked like a rival to Gordon Ramsay. Siwu explained that he had a guest over and wanted to stop somewhere first. Yushin told him not to force himself, but Siwu could treat him next time. He also advised Siwu not to act like a wimp or he would get bullied. A while later, Siwu arrived at an old neighborhood, wondering if he had the right address. He approached a huge door, and the moment someone stepped forward, Siwu realized they were a monster, a strong one. Suddenly, a beautiful woman greeted him, introducing herself as Half-Goblin, head of the Rising Dark Moon Quarters. Siwu introduced himself, explaining he was directed there by Mangti, and she let him in. The place felt dark and ominous at first glance, but near the far end, it resembled an old resort. Siwu was offered tea and wondered if they were still in the human realm. Half-Goblin revealed they were in a separate space connected to the human realm. Due to its isolation, the air and energy were fresher. She explained that the space functioned like a convenience store for monsters to help them adapt to the human realm. That reminded Siwu of what Mangti had mentioned. He retrieved his rewards, and Half-Goblin was delighted like she met a client for her escort business. She explained that he could exchange his coins for human realm currency, each coin worth a whopping 3 million. Siwu couldn't believe it. He went from broke to bougie. Half-Goblin also displayed some spirit pills for him to inspect. They were used to recover monster force, which was scarce in the human realm. These particular pills were crafted from ingredients from the spirit realm, passed down within their establishment. Without hesitation, Siwoo wanted to buy them, curious about the different colors. Hongrian explained that the colors reflected recovery rates and price. The black pill was the least effective, and Siwoo opted for that one. Hongrian smirked, knowing she had scammed him. Typically, even high-class monsters needed 3 to 4 hours to digest a black pill, and as a half-monster, Siwoo shouldn't have been able to absorb even half. However, if he somehow managed to, he would recover his monster force within a few hours. Siwoo popped the pill immediately. In a burst of magic, Hongrian's eyes widened, and Siwoo had absorbed an immense amount of monster force. Siwoo himself couldn't believe that a supposedly low-tier pill had such a powerful effect. A few minutes earlier, at the other end of the moon quarters, Dongwoo was attending to another client, pouring him an exquisite liquor. Yusium was pleased with the drink, but visibly annoyed that it was a guy pouring it instead of the beautiful Hongrian. He grumbled, wondering why she wasn't back yet. Dongwoo explained that she had gone to meet a guest Mangti had spoken of. Yusium raised an eyebrow, curious to know more about the guest. When Dongwoo revealed it was a half-goblin, Yusium's mood soured immediately. He scoffed, annoyed to be hearing about that loser again. Yusium couldn't understand why Mangti brought a halfling to the spirit realm, let alone allowed him to participate in the ascension ceremony. As Dongwoo stayed quiet, Yusium assumed he was bored and decided to stir the pot. He mocked Dongwoo, reminding him that he was also halfling trash. Yusium sneered, stating that the moon quarters were basically a shelter for halflings with nowhere else to go. Though he begrudgingly admitted it was smart, a place to make them feel useful and acknowledged. However, he made it clear they would never be recognized as real monsters. Dongwoo brushed off the insult and calmly offered to refill Yusium's cup. Yusium clicked his tongue, frustrated he acted like an NPC bartender. Yusium then asked when he could leave. Dongwoo informed him that his coins had been exchanged, and he now had a residence with high status in the human realm. Yusium was genuinely impressed with how efficiently it had been handled. Yusium thought to himself that he wanted to contribute to his clan, so his father would finally allow him to participate in the ascension ceremony. He believed his strength wasn't far behind his siblings. Just then, his irritation returned as he noticed Hongrian still wasn't back. Dongwoo offered to fetch her, but Yusium waved him off, insisting she would serve him in his new human realm residence. He told her not to worry that there wouldn't be any belly bumping, but Dongwoo calmly told him that they weren't running an OF. Yusium grumbled but told Dongwoo to inform her anyway. Just then, a burst of magic shook the air and both men were stunned. Like water, Kai flowed through all living beings. Its properties and usage varied by individual. Meanwhile, back at the other end of the moon quarters, Siwoo was also feeling the effects and hoped Hongrian was all right as her knees buckled. Siwoo was thoroughly impressed with the spirit pills, as he felt like he was on crack. Hongrian was shocked that the pill's usual limitations didn't apply to him. Just then, Yusium stormed in, fuming over the wave of energy emanating from Siwoo. He was looking for a fight, but Hongrian quickly took the blame. Yusium cut her off, telling her that trash should only speak when they are told. His irritation only grew when Siwoo's energy continued to surge, which he took as blatant disrespect. Hongrian apologized, followed by Siwoo, though he didn't like how rudely he spoke to some he just met. Yusium wanted Siwoo to repeat himself, and this time he did with a smile. This only fueled Yusium's anger. Using his ability, he shoved Siwoo out of the room. Yusium claimed this wasn't bullying, but him humbling Siwoo. He kept up his attacks, but Hongrian warned him that violence was prohibited in the moon quarters and threatened to report him. Yusium didn't care. He attacked Hongrian, telling her not to overstep her bounds, expressing disappointment that he had his eye on her, but now she was nothing but a letdown. Hongrian struggled against his technique, then realized the nature of it, the innate ability of a divine beast Hidi. Yusium demanded Siwoo kneel and beg for mercy. Instead, Siwoo casually removed his jacket prepared for a fight, even if no one knew why the jacket had to come off. Yusium was thrilled, convinced he would take Siwoo's 6 feet under, but Siwoo easily repelled his attacks, leaving everyone stunned. Analyzing the situation, Siwoo deduced that Yusium's technique involved water, fired at incredible speed. He recognized the smell of tea from earlier and realized that was how Yusium had knocked him out of the room. The subsequent attacks were drawn from moisture in the air and grass. Siwoo was unfazed compared to the opponent he faced earlier. Yusium was small fry. Blitzing toward Yusium, Siwoo created a feint which Yusium fell for and landed a solid punch to his gut. Hongrian's jaw dropped in shock as Siwoo emerged victorious. Hongryun froze, still trying to process what she had just witnessed, from Siwoo's sharp perception to his perfectly calculated attack. It was almost laughable that Yusium, the proud divine beast wannabe, ended up bowing to Siwoo. She was sure Siwoo had only shown up 3 days ago, yet he was already this strong. She couldn't help but wonder what exactly had happened to him in such a short time. Meanwhile, Siwoo couldn't believe the fight was already over. He turned to Yusium, telling him to apologize, especially for attacking Hongryun, who had simply tried to stop the fight. Yusium's anger flared, but Siwoo noticed something off in that moment. An icicle shot through his arm. Yusium immediately seized the opening and charged in, but Siwoo reacted faster, kicking Yusium clean out of the room. However, Yusium's clan specialized in controlling and manipulating water, even amplifying water pressure to deadly levels. Smirking, Yusium watched Siwoo bleeding out. He revealed that he had slipped tiny amounts of water into Siwoo's bloodstream, a slow, hidden attack. Siwoo's body began giving out as Yusium explained that monsters took longer to recover from poison or infections. Despite his injuries, Yusium admitted Siwoo was strong, likely because of his goblin lineage. Just then, Yusium decided it was time for Siwoo to take his L. He gathered a stream of water to deliver the final blow. Suddenly, Siwoo's eyes flared with anger, and to Yusium's shock, his wound healed instantly. Panicking, Yusium hurled a water ball at Siwoo. Though it looked small, the attack was dense and heavy, with similar strength to Truck-kun. Siwoo quickly summoned his goblin club. He transformed it like he did during his fight with Yushin. Without swordsmanship to rely on, Siwoo simply poured an immense amount of monster force into the weapon, slicing the water ball apart with ease. Yusium shielded himself from the aftermath, but as the water settled, he realized Siwoo had vanished. Suddenly, Siwoo appeared behind him and in one swift motion severed both of Yusium's arms. Yusium howled in agony and was surprised since Yusium claimed monsters had high pain tolerance. Still, the sight of Yusium trembling uncontrollably amused him. Siwoo kicked him into a nearby room where Yusium collapsed, shaking. Yusium's clan was ranked among the divine beasts, rulers feared by many monsters. Yet at that moment, Yusium realized he was the Drake to Siwoo's Kendrick. Broken and humiliated, Yusium apologized to Siwoo. However, Siwoo told him the one who deserved the apology was Hongryun. Yusium hesitated, but the look on Siwoo's face made it clear he had no choice. Reluctantly, Yusium approached Hongryun and pleaded for forgiveness. Meanwhile, back at Siwoo's residence, Xiaohua lay in bed, wondering why breakfast hadn't been served yet, completely unaware her housemate was out there handing out divine beast beatdowns before brunch. Later that day, Maryong, the head of the house, couldn't believe the mess at the moon quarters during his absence. Dongwu took responsibility, but Maryong already knew Yusium was basically a walking red flag. He asked if Hongryun was all right, and Dongwu confirmed she didn't suffer any serious injuries. Still, Dongwu admitted she was clearly shaken, though he felt none of this was really her fault. Maryong then asked where Siwoo was. Meanwhile, Siwoo looked like someone who had just sobered up after a wild party, reflecting on the whirlwind of events he had been through. He realized how cocky he had acted, which wasn't like him at all, and wondered if the magic force was messing with his head. His brain felt cooked. Lying down, Siwoo tried to justify the fight, but the fact that he cut Yusium's arm to suppress his magic and enjoyed it confirmed that he was a monster. He prayed it was just a temporary side effect when Hongryun made an excuse to enter. Siwoo asked if she was feeling better. She told him it was a minor injury, but Siwoo had been in her state before, and that wasn't minor. Hongryun then bowed, asking for his forgiveness, and Siwoo was confused. Just then, she confessed that the black pill wasn't good. The silver and gold pills were better, but out of jealousy, she still recommended the black pill. Siwoo was shocked she scammed him like an African prince. Just then, Hongryun revealed that she was a half-breed too. Hybrids born of humans and monsters weren't rare, but in Hongryun's case, she could sense monster force, but couldn't absorb vital essence. It hurt her deeply to be born that way, and she envied Siwoo for his plot armor ability. To her, he was basically a walking miracle, a hybrid recognized as a true monster. Out of jealousy, she pulled her little prank and was now ready to commit seppuku over it. Maryong clearly didn't think that was the right call and personally came over to apologize. He told Hongryun to keep entertaining the other guests while Siwoo, surprisingly chill, accepted the apology and joked about getting a refund for the black pill. Maryong agreed without hesitation. Hongryun was relieved that Siwoo wasn't holding a grudge. Siwoo reassured her not to stress over it. Maryeong then mentioned arranging a reconciliation meeting with Yuseum. Siwoo was caught off guard learning that Yuseum was from a high-class clan. Maryeong explained it was highly advisable for Siwoo to attend, otherwise misunderstandings could spread that wouldn't end well for him. It was better to clear the air ASAP, and Maryeong felt partially responsible for the situation. He only hoped Siwoo wouldn't go too hard on them. Siwoo didn't fully get the concern, but if they wanted to fight, he was game. Maryeong warned him not to underestimate them, but Siwoo didn't care and casually announced that he planned to become the Yakai King. Maryeong was visibly stunned at how casually Siwoo threw that out there. He warned that making such claims could easily get him to his dad. However, Siwoo was prepared for that, and added that Yuseum threw a tantrum over nothing, so he could only imagine the chaos if he had declared his ambitions earlier. Siwoo also pointed out how terrifying it would be if monsters roamed freely in the human realm, and this piqued Maryeong's interest. Siwoo hesitated, done with his clowning, but Maryeong assured him that he was genuinely interested. Maryeong reflected that it was the first time he had a conversation like this since the previous owner of the Moon Quarters. As a token of apology, Maryeong gave Siwoo a gift and revealed his intention to invest in him. Later that day, Siwoo finally arrived home looking like a wage slave clocking out of his 9 to 5. Seolhwa eyed him suspiciously, asking where he'd been. Siwoo apologized for being late. Just then, Seolhwa revealed that she had some intel. Siwoo perked up, greeting Salmi, but was immediately kicked by the bird. Seolhwa sighed, scolding him for mistaking that tiny ball of violence for Salmi. Seolhwa warned Siwoo to be more cautious so that not to offend Salmi's feelings. She shared that Salmi had been running around gathering information and had narrowed down areas where multiple missing persons cases occurred. Soon, they would go to those locations. Seolhwa had one more thing to say as she smacked Siwoo across the face for making her wear his sweaty clothes and told him to take her shopping. A while later, they arrived at a department store, and Seolhwa was amazed by how humans managed to construct such a tall building without using magic. This was Siwoo's first time buying clothes. After all, with his previous pig appearance, nothing he wore ever really mattered. Now this was the moment Siwoo had dreamed of, and he planned to enjoy it to the fullest. His eyes sparkled with excitement, while Seolhwa, sensing the chaos coming, couldn't wait to escape from him. As they entered the department store, Siwoo quickly realized how expensive the clothes were, and his soul practically left his body. He was convinced they had accidentally added extra zeros to every price tag. Just then, Seolhwa strutted out, looking like a full-blown Instagram baddie, asking Siwoo for his opinion. Siwoo couldn't hold back his tears, not because of her beauty, but because his bank account was on life support. Still, Siwoo tried to look on the bright side. This was his way of paying her back for helping him deal with the monsters. Before he could recover, Seolhwa was already off looking at more clothes. Siwoo didn't even know more was a concept when it came to shopping. He was on the verge of collapse when she suddenly handed him some coins. Seolhwa told him not to hesitate to ask for more and was her way of saying thanks. At that moment, Seolhwa had officially become his sugar mommy. A while later, after more clothes and more coin drain, Siwoo couldn't help but simp for her. Seolhwa was genuinely surprised that he found her beautiful, but quickly snapped and knocked some sense back into him. As they headed out, Siwoo couldn't hide his surprise that Seolhwa had this much fashion sense, especially considering it was her first time in the human realm. She admitted it was thanks to Salmi constantly bringing back fashion magazines. Seolhwa was about to share her real reason for coming to the human realm when someone bumped into Siwoo and quickly apologized. Seolhwa was confused by how humans reacted, expecting Siwoo to clap the guy into another dimension. Siwoo shrugged it off, saying it wasn't that deep. Seolhwa pointed out that in the spirit realm, acting that passively would get him labeled as weak. From her perspective, she was sure Siwoo's fight with Yuseum ended with him bowing down even if he could win. Siwoo was stunned she knew about the fight. Seolhwa casually revealed that he reeked of wet dog, the classic sign of a monster brawl. She also guessed the culprit was the youngest sibling, Yuseum. Siwoo asked if they were close, and Seolhwa explained she was friends with his sister. A few years ago, rumors had circulated about Seolhwa. When she found out Yuseum's sister started them, she confronted her. Siwoo asked if they fought, and Seolhwa admitted that she made her eat dirt. She hadn't seen them since, but had heard Yuseum had been making threats. She warned Siwoo that it wouldn't be easy to adjust to being a monster and advised him to wield violence decisively. Siwoo thanked her for the life lesson, but Seolhwa firmly told him to be ready to end whatever he faced. Meanwhile, the couple that bumped into Siwoo were rushing off somewhere. Suddenly, the guy disappeared and his chick panicked, wondering where he went. At that moment, the monster known as Puppeterian was nearby, drinking coffee. She muttered that guys never tasted great unless they fought back. Just then, a young man, clearly new to this horror show, stared wide-eyed at Puppeterian like it was love at first sight, right before Puppeterian casually spit out the guy's glasses, traumatizing him for life. Puppeterian's brother arrived, ready for a little chat. She wondered why he was breaching that rule of not interfering in one another's turf. Her brother explained that some monsters were onto them, but Puppeterian didn't see the point in stopping now. Still, he insisted they handle it quietly and asked for her help. Apparently, there were already two monsters lurking nearby. At the same time, Siwoo realized Sialwa hadn't dragged him to the department store just for clothes. She revealed that she suspected monsters were nesting in the area. Sialwa smirked confidently. They had already found their targets and the hunt was officially on. Will Siwoo be able to become the Yakai King, or will the human realm be plunged into chaos? Comment next part if you are interested, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-wrenching, action-filled recaps. As always, thanks for watching.